New this morning, President Trump just said the United States needs Greenland and that anything less than total control is unacceptable.
Something unusual is unfolding at the top of the world, far from daily headlines and political rallies, yet powerful enough to influence the future of global politics. Greenland, long seen as a remote and quiet Arctic land, has suddenly become a pressure point where power, alliances, and restraint collide. While Washington raises its voice and Europe struggles to stay united, another global power is moving carefully and patiently. What appears to be hesitation on the surface may already be a strategic advantage, because China seems to have understood the moment faster than anyone else, and the consequences of this shift could shape global politics for many years ahead. China's official response has been calm and carefully measured. Statements from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs focus on stability, international law, and the need to avoid escalation. The language is deliberately neutral, avoiding threats or emotional reactions. On the surface, China appears distant and unconcerned. But behind closed doors, internal assessments tell a different story. Inside Beijing, many analysts see the situation around Greenland as a historic turning point, one that exposes growing cracks in the Western system that once appeared united and strong. From China's perspective, the United States is no longer acting as the guardian of the international rules it helped establish after World War II. Instead, Washington is seen as undermining those same rules by pressuring allies and ignoring long-standing norms when it suits its interests. This contradiction has not gone unnoticed in Beijing. Chinese strategists view the Greenland situation as a moment where Western values and actions no longer align, weakening the moral authority that the United States has relied on for decades. There is a strong sense of irony in how the situation is unfolding. For years, Washington has accused other powers of threatening sovereignty, breaking international law, and destabilizing regions. Now, similar accusations are being directed back at the United States itself. Internal Chinese analyses argue that the Greenland dispute represents one of the first serious moments in modern history where NATO's unity is threatened not by an external enemy, but by actions taken by its own leading member. That realization alone has altered strategic thinking far beyond the Arctic. This shift is not just theoretical. According to several regional security observers, China's military has quietly adjusted its posture. The People's Liberation Army has moved into a higher state of readiness, while the PLA Navy has increased activity in northern waters. Official explanations describe these movements as scheduled exercises, scientific research missions, or measures to protect commercial shipping. On paper, these explanations appear routine, but when the timing, scale, and location are examined together, a broader pattern becomes visible. This is not a short visit or a symbolic display. It signals a long-term expansion of Chinese presence in a region traditionally dominated by the United States and its European allies. Analysts in Asia note that Denmark's position has become increasingly fragile as coordination between Washington and European capitals weakens. Greenland may be geographically remote, but politically it sits at the center of a complex network of alliances and defense obligations. From Beijing's point of view, moments like this are rare. When established powers hesitate or turn inward, space opens for others to secure long-term advantages without open confrontation. China's strategy has been to move steadily and quietly, embedding itself economically, diplomatically, and now militarily, while avoiding actions that would force an immediate response. Patience, not speed, has been the guiding principle. Much of the discussion around Greenland focuses on its natural resources, and for good reason. The island holds large deposits of rare earth elements, uranium, and other materials essential to modern technology and defense industries. These resources matter greatly in a world where supply chains are increasingly politicized. However, resources alone do not explain China's deep interest in the region. Geography plays an even more important role. Climate change is reshaping the Arctic faster than many expected. As ice melts, new shipping routes are emerging, turning once theoretical paths into real commercial corridors. These Arctic routes could significantly shorten travel distances between Asia and Europe, reducing transit times, fuel costs, and reliance on traditional choke points. For the world's largest trading nation, this is not a minor development. Chinese policy documents have described the Arctic for years as a future extension of global trade networks, sometimes calling it a northern version of the Belt and Road Initiative. The instability surrounding Greenland has only accelerated efforts to turn that vision into reality. Establishing an early presence allows China to influence how these routes are governed, regulated, and protected in the future. Seen through this lens, Chinese naval activity in Arctic waters is less about Greenland itself and more about protecting long-term national interests. Influence gained early tends to last, especially when existing powers are distracted by internal disagreements. But there is another layer to China's thinking. one that is more pragmatic and less discussed publicly. Chinese analysts have openly considered scenarios in which the United States escalates its pressure on Europe to the point of imposing control over Greenland by force or coercion. Such a move would severely damage Washington's credibility on sovereignty and territorial integrity. For decades, American diplomacy has been built on the idea that borders must not be changed through pressure or force. That principle has been central to U.S. criticism of other powers, particularly in sensitive regions elsewhere in the world. If the United States were seen violating that principle first, its arguments would lose much of their global weight. In Beijing, this possibility is viewed as a potential reset of international norms. In a world where power openly overrides law, no single country can claim moral authority. Under such conditions, future conflicts would be judged differently, not as exceptions, but as part of a broader pattern of behavior. This does not mean China is seeking immediate confrontation. On the contrary, restraint remains central to Beijing's approach. But it does mean that every step taken by Washington regarding Greenland is being carefully measured for its long-term implications. The situation is being treated as a test of the international system itself. That is why China's actions remain balanced. It is not aligned openly with Denmark, nor has it directly challenged the United States. Instead, it is anchoring its presence during a period of uncertainty, ensuring it cannot be excluded from future Arctic decisions once the situation stabilizes. From Beijing's perspective, systems under stress rarely return to their previous form. Inside China, language once reserved for internal briefings has started appearing more openly. Officials and analysts increasingly describe the current moment as a historical shift. Reports presented to senior leadership emphasize that alliances once considered permanent can weaken quickly when political choices clash with national interests. The lesson being drawn is clear. Reliance on existing structures now carries greater risk than before. This understanding shapes China's behavior today. Public calm is matched with internal coordination. Naval movements are supported by diplomatic outreach, intelligence activity, and economic planning aimed at securing a lasting Arctic role. European reactions are being closely observed. If European governments fail to respond collectively to pressure from Washington, Chinese strategists will see it as confirmation that Western unity is no longer guaranteed. In that case, future engagement may shift toward bilateral relationships rather than large alliances. The presence of Chinese ships in Arctic waters would then represent permanence, not provocation. At the same time, Beijing is aware of the risks. Miscalculation in the Arctic could have global consequences. For that reason, caution remains central, but inaction has already been ruled out. Greenland has become a stress test for the global order, and China intends to learn from every move made by others. As tensions continued to rise, Greenland's own leadership moved quickly to set clear boundaries. Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen stated openly that Greenland's sovereignty is not negotiable. Speaking in Nuuk, he made it clear that while Greenland is open to cooperation with international partners, control over its territory is a firm red line. His message reflected growing concern that decisions were being discussed without Greenland's direct involvement. Nielsen also acknowledged confusion surrounding recent discussions between Washington and NATO leadership. He noted that details affecting Greenland had not been clearly shared with his government, deepening fears that major powers were speaking about the island rather than with it. This uncertainty has strengthened Greenland's push to assert political autonomy at a moment when global attention is sharply focused on the Arctic. Denmark echoed this stance. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen reaffirmed that sovereignty is not up for debate, even as Copenhagen remains open to security cooperation under existing agreements. Danish officials have pointed to the 1951 defense agreement with the United States, stressing that any updates must respect Denmark's authority and Greenland's status. Frederiksen described the situation as challenging, but said structured dialogue on Arctic security remains possible if legal boundaries are respected. Remarks from Washington have continued to unsettle Europe. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, President Trump described a framework agreement that he claimed would give the United States full access to Greenland, calling it permanent in scope. These comments raised alarm across European capitals, especially following earlier rhetoric that framed Greenland as a national security necessity. Although Trump later ruled out the use of force and stepped back from proposed tariffs against European countries opposing his position, uncertainty has not faded. European leaders remain uneasy, concerned not only about what has been said, but about how quickly positions appear to shift. The lack of clear written terms has left allies questioning long-term intentions. NATO leadership has tried to steady the situation. Secretary General Mark Rutte stated that no compromise on sovereignty was discussed and emphasized that NATO's focus remains on Arctic security amid rising global competition. According to officials, plans are being developed to improve coordination in the region, with timelines extending into 2026. Economic issues, including mineral development, were not part of these talks and would require Greenland's direct participation. Germany has taken a cautious approach. Chancellor Friedrich Merz urged restraint and dialogue, welcoming signs of de-escalation while reaffirming the importance of sovereignty and international law. Speaking in Davos, he framed Arctic security as a shared responsibility and called on European NATO members to strengthen their regional defense efforts. Despite these reassurances, skepticism persists across Europe. Many governments fear sudden policy shifts and question whether existing guarantees will hold. Frustration is growing over what is seen as heavy-handed rhetoric from Washington, reinforcing doubts about the future reliability of traditional alliances. Meanwhile, China continues to move quietly. Beijing has avoided dramatic statements, choosing instead to observe and adjust. Chinese analysts see the Arctic situation not as a single dispute, but as evidence of deeper change in the global system. Greenland has become a symbol of how power, influence, and rules are being tested. From China's perspective, the Arctic is entering a new phase where presence and preparation matter more than confrontation. The goal is not immediate dominance, but long-term positioning. Each diplomatic move and naval presence adds weight to that strategy. Greenland, once distant from global politics, now stands at the center of a shifting world order. The Arctic is no longer just a remote region. It is becoming a space where the future balance of power is quietly taking shape.